Hey, hockey fans, what is going on? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. My name is Norman James. However you're listening, thank you very much for doing so. There's so much going on in the world of hockey right now, in particular with those Maple brothers running near the top of the league, coming off a big win that Mike, of course, is not completely 100% satisfied with. What else is new? He'll tell us why. There's the Nylander versus the Leafs impasse. Is this thing going down to the 11th hour? So many Nylanderites believe that it's a done deal and it's just a matter of time. So when is that time? I'd love to know. Plus, there's all kinds of other things that Mike and I are going to engage in. Your questions sent to us via Twitter and other stuff too. I digress a lot. Mike's ready to go. I'm ready to go. I know you are too. So what do you say? Let's pod. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And here he is, my podcast partner in crime, the one and only Michael P. Augello. Good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
Good afternoon, Norman. I am well. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm still reeling from that 4-2 Leafs win over the Beasts who used to eat Leafs. Mitch Marner with 3 assists. Were they all primary, Mike? Because that's been eating me up inside.
Well, 3 assists is 3 assists. I don't care if they're primary or secondary, but he was central in the victory. He assisted on the Josh. Well, he didn't get an assist on the Josh Levo goal. That was the only one that he didn't get an assist on. But he actually helped create the play, and then got it to Marleau to Ennis, and then Levo scored. But his playmaking ability is a force. But I have to say that last night, they played well at times. But this is the thing: Boston was extremely shorthanded. They didn't have Chara. They didn't have Charlie McAvoy, so they didn't have their top defensive pairing. They didn't have their best center and Leaf killer Patrice Bergeron. They didn't start their number one goaltender. They didn't start Tuukka Rask. They started Yaroslav Halak, and that game was 2-2 in the second period. And at the midpoint of the game, the shots were 29-15 Boston.
Can I pour a little more in your cup there, Michael?
Yeah,
I get your point. The Leafs didn't have Austin Matthews. They didn't have the exalted William Nylander, and they still got the job done. They were outshot. They still got the job done. Any victory against Boston, regardless of who they're facing roster-wise, is a morale boost for this Maple Leafs team because, along the way, besides perhaps reaching milestones that the franchise has never reached before, the process towards getting to a Stanley Cup final and ultimately winning that damn jug includes overcoming finally the Boston Bruins, and any step they can take in that direction, whether it be on the score sheet or in between their ears, they have to take. And I believe they took one last night.
Well, I mean, the problem is, and I'm always the Mr. Glass is half empty and not glass is half full. But I think in terms of analysis, it's right to be that way. This team is too dependent on Frederik Andersen being at the top of his game and making numerous saves to be able to, I think, plot a course where they win the Stanley Cup. You have to have great goaltending, but you can't. I mean, they gave up 40 shots to a Boston team that's right now, I'd say, average at best offensively. Before the Saturday game against Philadelphia, I believe the stat was they had given up that Anderson in his previous 4 starts, or Leaf goaltenders in their previous 4 starts, had faced over 40 shots a game. That cannot be the way things go. They have to be able to cut down on offensive chances. And honestly, you look at the way they played defense last night, and TSN during one of the periods showed the replay that pointed it out perfectly. On the one goal, the power play goal by Pasternak, Ron Hainsey and Travis Dermott could not get the puck out of the defensive zone. On the other Pasternak goal, off a faceoff, Tavares loses the faceoff, and that happens. Ron Hainsey misses his assignment. Pasternak goes to the front of the net. Torrey Krug feeds it right to him, and it's in the net. You, especially from a top pairing guy, and I'm zeroing in on Hainsey, but there are other players as well. You cannot have that kind of play defensively and expect to win consistently. They're doing it basically right now on the back of Freddie Andersen and on the back of their offense.
We're so focused on getting I'm going to try that again because I could hear feedback. We're so focused on getting William Nylander back in the fold, or at least many people are. We're losing focus on another issue that continues to rear its head in wins and losses, and that's the defensive situation. Ron Hainsey should be giving young defensemen pep talks and playing 12, 13 minutes a night. He's playing way too much. He's doing way beyond what he should be required to do at this point of his career. And I'll use this joke until the end of time. The man has a whole bag full of Viking River Cruise pamphlets that he wants to put into action and, finally live his dreams out and, I don't know, be on a vacation that doesn't require, a stop in San Jose, Anaheim, and Los Angeles. What I'm saying is he's in the twilight of his career and, should be thinking of things to do post-career as opposed to logging as many minutes and being put front and center and having so much responsibility placed squarely on his shoulders when I'm not so sure they brought him in to be that guy. Even if they did, it was a faulty piece of judgment from, was it Lou who signed him?
It was Lou who signed him, and Babcock
Yeah.
who's put him in that position. And
Yeah,
I mean,
but they just don't. Who else are you going to put in that position? And the interesting thing is, we're talking about the Leafs defense not delivering at a point where we believe it's Stanley Cup worthy. Yet last night, Igor Ozhiganov and Travis Dermott score their first goals of the season. So offensively, the Leafs defense is not really missing or beat. Or if you thought it was on a whole, we're beginning to see a bit of an eruption in that regard. But it's about more than that. And I understand where you're coming from in terms of a 200-foot game, all three zones, as the great Dale Hunter would point out endlessly at Knights practices over the years. You've got to play a complete game. And even if you are coming out victorious on the score sheet, you look back on whether that game was a complete game and how that game, its strategy and the way you employed it would be put to use in a game of greater consequence. And those games are certainly coming. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James, along with Mike Augello. We have lots of questions that people have engaged us with through Twitter. Thank you very much for putting that out there, Mike. Clearly, William Nylander is on the minds of a lot of people. Before we get into that, though, Travis Dermott picks up a goal. Igor Ozhiganov picks up a goal. Do you like that from a young defensive standpoint? Meaning, do you like what you're seeing there, Mike? Knowing that this is Jake Gardner. It's got to be Jake Gardner's last year, and he might be the last month or two, through 3 months with the team, right? If he's traded, do you like to see that? And then hey, there's at least progress being made in that regard.
Well, I don't know if Gardner's going to be traded. Unfortunately, I think the Leafs are going to go down the path that they went with Van Riemsdyk and Bozak, where they're going to own rental him and just let him walk away. That's not something I would do. And I know I've heard Brian Burke on Sportsnet say the same thing. You just can't do that. But I think they're going to, because I think before the deadline, they're going to add a defenseman. I'm convinced of that, whether it's in a Nylander trade in the next week or whether it's before the deadline with the cap space that they have open. And, that's not a statement against Dermott, because I think Dermott has played well in his second year. I think he's making progress. Babcock is using him on the penalty kill. He's very adept at rushing the puck. I think Ozhiganov has sort of been he's been fairly good. I mean, I don't think he's a great defender, but I think he's decent. And he's got size, and he has as Babcock would say, he has a good stick. He's got a long reach, and that is helpful. But the problem is that I think Hainsey is a better fit as a bottom pairing, which is what I thought they were going to get out of him when they signed him, because essentially I thought he was the replacement for Matt Hunwick, and instead Babcock has put him on the top pairing, and that's had beneficial effect on Morgan Rielly. But now I just don't think Hainsey's a 20 to 25 minute defenseman.
He's not.
Yeah. So, and I think what the plan is going to be is they're going to get a defenseman at the deadline who has a year or two left in a contract. And that defenseman, along with Gardner, that will bolster the defense for this year. And then once Gardner leaves in free agency, then that guy will basically take the spot of Gardner on the second pairing for a year or two.
What about the Gardner-Marincin pairing? You don't think that is,
Well,
those two will be playing in the final minutes of Game 7
Well,
in June?
that's the funny thing is like when Zaitsev had the flu yesterday, he missed the morning skate, and Marinson is the number 7. He filled in with Jake Gardner. When your first option when somebody is sick or somebody is hurt is Martin Marinson, your defense is in trouble. And I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what the analytics numbers are. He is a horrific defenseman. He has been since he joined the Leafs. He will be after he leaves the Leafs. He's just not a good defenseman. And I think they have blue liners that might be options later in the year, like Kali Rosen or Andreas Borgman down with the Marlies. I think they're going to keep their young guys down there for seasoning. But I think that Kyle Dubas has to get a defenseman or two at the deadline to bolster the blue line, because that's the only weak spot on this team, honestly.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James along with Mike Augello. If you're listening on YouTube, thank you so much for doing so. Why not just hit the subscribe button? These are incredible times for the Maple Leafs. All sorts of news surrounding the team that is related to off the ice stuff, at least for now, with the latest on Matthews. The division created through this Nylander impasse. You have Camp Nylander, his father, Louis Gross, King Willie, and then, millions upon millions of people who just love the man and, think that it's essential the Maple Leafs bring him back. And then you have others who probably undervalue William Nylander, but in that undervaluation, they are thinking more towards a life without Willie and perhaps an asset in return if a trade can be swung. I'm not so sure if the Leafs could win a trade physically or mentally, Mike. I don't know. We can talk a little bit about that as we engage some of the Leafs converts and TLC OGs who've contributed questions. Thanks to your solicitation, Mike, because you just have such social media power. Cam at Cam Watts, 25. He always has a great question for us, and I like this question because it does relate to Jake Gardner and trading him. Seeing how both are UFAs, would a Tyler Myers for Jake Gardner trade make sense? Dermott could move up into Jake's spot, and Myers could play with Morgan Riley. Hashtag Ask Mike. TLCOG right there, Cam Watts. In a perfect world, let's do it, Mike. Let's do it. I like that.
I've talked for Hockey Buzz, our writer Peter Tessier, who does the webcast with us. We have talked about a Gardner for Myers deal forever, and it makes a lot of sense for both teams because they're weak on the left side and the Leafs are weak on the right. But and it doesn't sound like the Jets are going to re-sign Tyler Myers, but I don't know if it's been discussed. It makes a lot of sense positionally, but I think that the Leafs are keeping Gardner, and I think this is unfortunately so because you can't trade Gardner and say you're contending for the Stanley Cup in their minds because Gardner is a piece of the pie, and maybe they think that they can re-sign him at a lower amount. I don't think that's going to be possible, but I think they're going to hold out that he would take less to stay. I don't think that's going to be the case. He has a chance of making $6.5 to $7 million as a free agent. But it would make sense, but I don't think it's going to happen.
This is where a lot of the number crunchers, and God, we need them because they're smarter than we are, communication-wise, probably not always the best, but it's where they start to lose their way a little bit. You can't keep Jake Gardner, guys. You've got enough of new Jake Gardners coming through the pipeline. Just because you like him and just because, his Corsi was amazing for 4 games and, the first 4 games of the Boston series or something, you can't keep him. You can't keep him and pay William Nylander more on an average annual value than Mitch Marner because you think statistically he's better than Mitch Marner, and pay Matthews more money than Connor McDavid. You can't do it. That's the problem. So with Jake Gardner, the guy has done all he can as a Maple Leaf. He's increased his value to a point where there's no point paying him that kind of money based on what he should be making for his offensive output. When you have Timothy Liljegren coming through, you have Travis Dermott starting to emerge. You have Rasmus Sandin in the organization. These are not only Jake Gardiner 2.0s, but 2.0 pluses, because you're hopefully cultivating defensemen who learn and understand more about the instincts of the game than Jake Gardiner has been able to exude with the Maple Leafs. Look, the guy, in a perfect world, you could have that guy. If this was $100 million team, you could do that. It's not like I hate the guy. I just want to see his skill set replaced with another skill set that the Leafs need, considering the Leafs have his skill set in spades. This is the Leafs Convo. We're ripping through some questions and some comments that Leafs converts have put forth on Twitter, thanks to Mike and his incredible social media power. Tim Bonehill: since we're in a cap-driven world in the NHL, do you foresee Babs, Dubas possibly keeping Kapanen's and Johnsson's value heading into RFA negotiations down by playing them no higher than the third line upon Matthews and Nylander's return? Mike, are young Leaf fans getting way too wrapped up in this expectation that it's a done deal with William Nylander? Because all I'm reading is when he's back, when he's back, when he's back. It's almost as if, one bit of information is passed along and then it just permeates and just overtakes the masses, that there's this is the assertion in this tweet. Tim Bonehill, thanks so much.
I'll answer his question first on the two players, Johnsson and Kapanen. Mike Babcock is not going to factor in the cap when it comes to, if the player is playing, he's going to play. And Kapanen has done very well playing now on the second line with Marleau and Kadri. Now there's probably going to be some line reorganization once Matthews comes back, and Matthews was skating at the MasterCard Center this morning, not wearing a non-contact jersey, so it's possible that he gets in tomorrow against San Jose, and if not, against Minnesota on the weekend in Minnesota. But I don't think, if Kapanen is on the way to scoring 25 to 30 goals, that benefits the team. So I don't think that's going to factor into Babcock's decision. It's going to be up to Kyle Dubas and the organization and the management players like Lawrence Gilman and Brandon Pridham to manipulate the cap so they can fit these guys in. And that's, now when it comes to Nylander, you can't assume anything. I mean, there's a lot of speculation out there. There was a report today saying that he was spotted at Pearson Airport. I haven't heard any kind of validity confirming that. I honestly think, and this is the interesting thing, Nick Kypreos said yesterday on, I believe it was Tim and Sid's show, that there had not been any contact between the Leafs and Nylander for the last 3 days. Now that's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because the show was on Monday. If that's the case, that's either indicative of one of two things. They've either agreed to a deal or there's still an impasse. And based on what's happened over the last 2 months, I think there's still an impasse. Elliot Friedman on Saturday said that the two sides were at least $500,000 apart. And there's been some speculation that the impasse right now is the signing bonus on the new contract, because understandably, from their point of view, Nylander wants a high signing bonus so he gets paid for the time that he's missed. And if I'm the Leafs, I tell him to take a long walk on a short
Whoa,
beer.
what is this, the Howard Stern show, Mike?
No.
I'm kidding. You've thrown that at me every week.
Well, but I pulled back there, Norm.
True.
Yes, but the point is that you're gonna, from their point of view, it's like, we're gonna reward this guy for basically giving us a tough time on a contract, and it's negotiations. That's part of the whole business, but you can't reward him by giving him heavy signing bonus. Plus, first of all, it sets a bad precedent for Marner and Matthews. The second thing is the CBA clause that allows them to load the first year, or the first year would be a greater amount, and then the remaining years would be less. That's a big benefit to the Leafs. If they go heavy signing bonus on that, it's less of a benefit. It affects how much the first year is, where they have a ton of cap space, and the years following when they don't. So I think that that's still a potential impasse that is holding things up. And until he's signed, I still think a trade possibility is up there. And I'll say something that maybe some people will be shocked, or some people will say I'm a little bit crazy, but I am convinced that even if he signs a bridge deal, or even if he signs a long-term deal, that William Nylander in maybe 2 years will not be on this team. This is a short-term thing, because remember, cost certainty on contracts are worth a hell of a lot more than a guy coming up as an RFA or a UFA. And if a team knows, okay, he's going to be making 6.3, 6.4 for the next 5 years, that's valuable to them. So I think his days are still numbered, even if he signs a contract.
So many fans have pinned their entire hockey fandom, their hopes and dreams on number 29. I mean, he is now their guy. And for you to say that, Mike, not only are you a bad person and terrible and worthless, but if you are anywhere near accurate, I mean, you are the second coming of you know who. And
Satan, there you go.
Yeah, it's not going to sit well with William Nylander fans. Tim Bonehill, I hope we were able to at least shed some opinion, or a different perspective on your question. And I see it. Another gentleman within this timeline has jumped in to educate Tim. So, Tim, good for you, buddy. Daver16, is it 5 p.m. or December 1st yet? Hashtag Ask Mike. I guess that's a play on the whole thing in Columbus.
Yeah.
Kyle Dubas telling a Blue Jackets fan, that he'll have an update at 5 p.m. and people went nuts.
That just illustrates how hilarious social media is, and the fervor for news on something that, I'm sure other markets, when they have an RFA, like when Ryan O'Reilly was an RFA in Colorado, or David Pasternak in Boston, there was a hue and cry, but nothing matches Toronto. And that's why I love the Toronto media market and the fans in Toronto, because the love of hockey and the interest in hockey is.
Is it hockey though, Mike?
It's hockey.
Are we interested in hockey? Because in this day and age, I find that a lot of fans are just interested in the cap. It's all about cap. It's how do you fit players into the cap? And there's not a lot of talk of cups. There's cap over cups, and perhaps you got to get the cap right before you get the cup. But I've had conversations with young fans who literally told me they'd rather have William Nylander and watch him play and have him be paid more and given more credence than a Mitch Marner for some unknown reason than have this team win a Stanley Cup. They'd rather have their players than win cups. And this is my point, and I make it over and over again. And I'm right. I'm 100% right. The goal of the organization is to win a Stanley Cup. It's not... The Maple Leafs were not created over 100 years ago. Conn Smythe did not have the Maple Leaf Gardens built in 7-8 months in order to placate and cater to William Nylander. Decades later, generations later. This is not what the organization is about. The organization was put here to endure years and years of futility and embarrassment, maybe to get to this point and finally win a Stanley Cup. It's not, the Leafs are not, they don't get the motors running every single day to finally land William Nylander on a major long contract, especially after everything they've gone through. And that's, again, this whole process has been really frustrating because people are starting to lose their way, and the divisions that are being created within this fan base. I mean, if William Nylander comes back and people who think he's a third liner, which he's not. I mean, the guy's a first line player, no question. And he's within his right to be standoffish in contract negotiation until he gets what he wants. And fans, a lot of fans would, just say, all right, whatever, he's back. But if William Nylander does not come back and he sits out the year, or he's traded, or he's paid, he takes money that a lot of his fans and supporters and number crunchers think that he should be taking more than, there's going to be beef and there's going to be problems within this fan base for a long time to come. And to be honest with you, you either want to get in, try to engage it, or you just try to turn it off and watch hockey, right, Mike?
If Nylander signs and when he comes back, and if he plays well, everything will be fine and dandy. If he doesn't play well, I want to see how many of these Nylander pom-pom waving aficionados.
Nylanderites. I've already
I'm
coined that
I'm
term.
I'm going to see how many of them are out there, because at that point they really won't have any leg to stand on. And
Oh, they will. Oh, no, Mike. It won't.
But
No. This is no. There is no backing off. There'd be plenty of excuses made for William Nylander and plenty of finger pointing at anyone else who is considered on the opposite side or an obstruction to William Nylander fluidly taking his place as the iconic player on this team.
but I'm just saying that it'll be hard to find them at that point. Maybe you're right. Maybe they'll be, such devotees of Nylander that they will say, well, there's this reason and that reason. Well, no, I mean the thing is, he is going to have to perform, and it's going to be tough coming back. If he signs a contract between now and 5 p.m. on Saturday, it's going to be tough for him to come in after, say, 30 to 35 games, whatever, how long it takes for him to get back into game shape and probably play a few games down in the AHL, for him to step right in and score at the pace that he scored the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens.
Mike, what I'm saying is that if William Nylander's not put in a prime position to succeed anywhere, if he's put on the second line, there will be complaints if he does not produce. If he's put on the first line,
Matthews.
no, I understand, but if all of a sudden it'll be, well, Matthews isn't there. There will be excuses made. William Nylander, to his followers and the Nylanderites, can do no wrong. If you ever get into an argument or a conversation with somebody who's just totally driven by analytics, it's an impossible proposition, because you are not talking about anything but the numbers.
Yeah, and I've had conversations, and I try to keep it, pleasant and not,
Keep it pleasant. Thanks, Mike. You're
Well,
such a pleasant guy.
I mean, I'm just saying, like,
The Mr. Rogers of hockey.
Because there's no point in sort of, because I don't agree with a lot of things that some of the analytics crowd come up with, but I think it's beneficial to be sort of respectful and have a good byplay back and forth. And there are some things you can learn, and
yeah, for sure.
there's some things they can learn from me, because I've watched hockey since I was 4 years old, and I know when a player is crap, and I know when a player is not crap. And there are certain players on many teams that I could look at them and look at the way they play, and I don't care what the numbers say, they're not good players. But let's move on.
Okay, Barb Dwyer, if Nylander signs, how much has Norman's opinion changed? Pretty harsh for the last little while. I'm a big William Nylander fan. He's a good hockey player. And what he's shown me that he's a good hockey player. But I don't think this organization's success and ability to win a Stanley Cup within my lifetime, and I don't know how long that's going to go, is conditional to signing William Nylander. I feel like there's this hype, this Nylander hype it's not only ginned up. I mean, it's not artificial, but it's a movement, and that's what you do on social media when you want to raise money or you want to push an agenda. That's basically what it is. It's an agenda, and I'm just not buying into it. If he's back, Barb, tomorrow, I just want to see him play well. I want to see him rip down the wing, cross the blue line, snap a shot or wrist a shot past the goaltender. I'm ready. I'm in. I'm all in. But if it's not him and it's someone else in his place, if it's Kapanen and a defenseman that's brought back in, or a younger player, or someone of equal asset value, if that's possible, then I'm fine with that too. I don't have to have William Nylander back in the fold, and I'll extend that. I don't even have to have Mitch Marner back in the fold. I mean, if we're in the same situation with Mitch Marner in a year or two, and if he's holding, or there's an impasse there, and it's not going to work out with him, then that's fine. I just want to see this team win a Stanley Cup, and I'm not pinning my hopes and dreams on any one player. It's my fandom is not predicated on having number 29 back in the mix. And I grant you, I'm not saying that the statistics aren't real and they don't have a value, or they can't be applied to how this team can function with him. But I don't have to have William Nylander. I'm not at that point as a fan. I'm past it now. I'm older now. I don't idolize or worship players. But Matt Sundin, of course. So does Mike in a very quiet and private fashion. But he's Swedish too, by the way. He's not a good old Ontario boy.
Yeah.
But I view it from a different perspective, and I love the Maple Leafs. I don't particularly love individual Leafs. Give me a Stanley Cup, Barb. That's all I want. If it's William Nylander hoisting it, I'll hug and kiss him. If it's not, I could care less. Go ahead, Mike.
The road to the Stanley Cup for every organization is asset management. That plain and simple. Is William Nylander a good to great player? Sure. I am convinced that the Leafs have a better chance of winning a Stanley Cup with the players that they can get for William Nylander over William Nylander himself. So that's where I'm at.
Who can you get though? And that's the thing.
We don't know.
Leafs? I know, and that's what I'm saying. When is this trade going to happen? It would be such a monumental, complex transaction. How does that, unless they're working on that right now, and that's been part of the holdup. Well, how do you make that happen, and how do you win that trade? Not only from an asset standpoint, but from a public relations perspective. How do you win that? It's impossible. It'd be almost impossible to win that. And where are those assets that can come back and actually contribute to the organization right now and help this goal further? Where does that happen, Mike? How does it happen?
I think that it's possible. I think that, it's not going to be a Taylor Hall for Adam Larson deal if there is a deal. I mean, the funny thing is that observing what has happened over the last few weeks, the number of scouts that were in Toronto at the beginning of the month, I'd say maybe up till 2 weeks ago, it was, in double figures, and multiple teams had multiple scouts, and now it has tailed off because I think remember a couple of weeks ago, Elliot Friedman reported that, or it was either Elliot or Chris Johnston reported that the Leafs were saying, okay, make your best offer. And I think the teams did make their best offers. So those offers are like in Kyle Dubas's notebook, and he's got them written down. And, I'm assuming that once he's exhausted every avenue, and then it comes down to whether Nylander signs the contract or doesn't sign the contract. If he doesn't sign it after December 1st, him being in the KHL or the SHL does the Leafs no good for this year, a year that they think they can win the Stanley Cup. So if there is a acceptable deal in that notebook, then I think he does it. And if there's not, then maybe he gets traded at the deadline. Maybe he gets traded at the draft. But if he doesn't sign by December 1st, I'm convinced that it'll be the last time we ever see William Nylander in a Leafs jersey.
Breaking news, Kyle Dubas's notebook has fallen on the floor out of his jacket. He was caught doing the floss, and everything just became dismantled and dislodged and hit the floor. Maybe Dave, our good buddy at David Nastigo 200 can gift that. Dave, did you catch that? Kyle Dubas's notebook?
I did. He was behind a wall, but I think he was clearly doing that.
I love it. My daughter can rip a floss, and my son can do it too. He just doesn't like when we watch when he does it. Poor little guy. Just a couple more questions, and then we can continue on with ending the show. Michael Moss, what will we talk about once Nylander signs? Here we go again. Once he signs, this is wishful thinking. Michael's probably a lot smarter than we are. So, I mean, if he thinks that Nylander's going to sign, that's fine. I don't know where. I still don't get a feeling that it's going to happen one way or the other.
Well, to answer his question, what are we going to concentrate on after December 1st? The date is February 25th.
Yeah.
The NHL trade deadline. Because even if they sign William Nylander, and right now the Leafs have over $12 million in cap space, even if they sign him and the front-loaded first year of the contract is in the $7 million range, which is very possible if it's a long-term deal, they're going to have a lot of cap space to add players. And this is an organization that is well-stocked in young prospects, has draft picks,
Mm.
and is clearly going for it this year to win the Stanley Cup. So I think that Kyle Dubas is going to be busy. I think he'll go out and get a defenseman. He might even go out and get himself another, maybe a left winger. I mean, Bob McKenzie said a couple days ago, and this is a name that I think a lot of Leaf fans would love, is Wayne Simmons. And with the tire fire that's going on in Philadelphia right now, and the fact that they signed JVR, and basically JVR is playing the role that Simmons played on the Flyers the last few years, which is in front of the net in the power play. I think there's a possibility that, Simmons is not getting the offers from Philadelphia that he wants, and he will be a rental. And if he's a rental, he comes back home and tries to win a Stanley Cup. I think it's a possibility.
He comes home, the good Ontario boy. You talk about Philadelphia being such a tire fire. I'm concerned because Gritty's costume looks so damn flammable.
I hate Gritty.
I love Gritty.
I hate Gritty.
Oh, I could rock a Gritty all day. Now, do I love Gritty more than I love William Nylander? And what does that say about my hockey IQ, Michael? Final question. My phone has just... I'll have to cut that out. Final question. Gerard Bondy. How did the Maple Leafs get a capable number 3 goalie? Well, I guess they wait till Curtis McElhinney's put on waivers, if that's...
That's not happening. Awesome. He's leading the Hurricanes in wins, and Calvin Pickard is like one of 2 healthy goalies in Philadelphia. So I don't think that's going to happen. The funny thing is that the Marlies right now are playing pretty well. They're scoring a ton of goals, and Jeff Glass, who was basically a Band-Aid on a bullet hole when the whole situation happened with McElhinney and Pickard.
What is that? Band-Aid on a bullet hole. I love the expressions, Mike.
Oh, thanks.
Keep them coming. We should do a segment where you just throw out a ton of expressions.
Okay. But he didn't address the situation. He didn't help them out. The Kazimierz Kaskasuo is back, but he's not ready for NHL duty. Eamon McAdam, who they picked up in the Matt Martin deal, is barely an AHL goaltender. He's been, not good at all. What they're going to look for, and what they probably can get fairly cheap, is a goaltender with NHL experience who has already gone through waivers and who is playing in the American Hockey League. And that'd be like, and I'm just throwing out a name here. I haven't heard anything. I'm just speculating. A guy like Eddie Lack with New Jersey, who got sent down to the minors. Because right now, clearly, it's Anderson and it's Sparks, but you have to prepare for the potential of an injury. And if there's a goalie out there who has NHL experience, who's in the AHL, that can help the Marlies and be there as a stopgap in case somebody gets hurt, that's what they'll look for. So I think that's what they'll go for before February 25th.
How surreal and Twilight Zone-like is hockey sometimes? 1 minute, Curtis McElhinney's making a save on Sidney Crosby to get the Maple Leafs into the playoffs for the first time in God knows how long. Then he's the backup to a Freddie Anderson in a 7-game series with the Boston Bruins. And then he starts the year with the Maple Leafs, hoping that he can maintain his position as the backup to Freddie. And then he's waived. And then he's with the Carolina Hurricanes. And then he's the goaltender in a game in which the Maple Leafs are all over him, but he stones them and beats them. And then his former platoon mate, or one of his colleagues, goaltending colleagues with the Maple Leafs, is in net against the Maple Leafs. And then that goaltender gets shellacked by the Maple Leafs. How crazy is this sport sometimes? Calvin Pickard and Curtis McElhinney start with the Maple Leafs in the preseason. Probably from their standpoint, unfortunately sent out of town, 2 new teams, and they both end up playing against the Maple Leafs in the same week, clearly experiencing different fates. What a crazy game this is.
Yeah, I mean, McElhinney is. I mean, he was interviewed before the game in Carolina and said he could understand why, the Leafs decided to keep the younger guy like Sparks, who would want a Calder Cup. But still, I mean, I don't think Mike Babcock is one of the people who was in favor of it, but I'll stick with that opinion. I think they decided they're going to keep Garrett Sparks, and they believe in him because they won with him. And I think the jury is still out on him. He had a shutout on Saturday, and it was the most unimpressive 34 save shot in the history of man, because
Mike, get off his back, man.
Even,
He's trying his best.
Even Jamie McLennan, who is a former NHL goaltender on TSN yesterday, and Jeff O'Neill, who scored 40 goals in the league, said, I don't remember him making one good save. So I'm sorry. I'm not alone in my opinion.
We can't be friends anymore if you don't think Garrett Sparks is better than Freddie Anderson. He's not a good Ontario boy. Wow, he's an American. It's for you. I'm with you. The jury's still out. These guys have to earn it. And Garrett Sparks, man, when he loses, he feels it. When he wins, I hope he feels it too. I'm on his side, and I'm on William Nylander's side, Mike. San Jose Wednesday, at Minnesota Saturday, and then look out, scout, as the great Bill Waters used to say. Tuesday, December 4th, at Buffalo, 7:30, the Hot Sauce Blue Cheese Arena.
Nope, not anymore. Not anymore.
It'll always be the Hot Sauce Blue Cheese Arena in my heart, Michael. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the Sabres have won 9 in a row, going for 10 tonight, I believe, and they're playing great hockey. They're getting really good goaltending from Carter Hutton, Linus Ullmark, Eichel's play, and Jeff Skinner is having a career year right before free agency, by the way. So it should be a very entertaining game by that time.
Mike, and people hate when I cut you off, but I don't know. I do create the show, so I may as well. And, I mean, you're a lot smarter than me. I've got to get my words in edgewise. Talk about much ado about nothing. We talk Garrett Sparks and his 34 save shutout. These guys don't remember him making a save. Are we going to remember this 10-game or 9-game win streak in a few months, Mike? Are the Buffalo Sabres going to be there in the end, or is this just a team that is clearly on the ascent, but
I think in Buffalo,
the Leafs just have to do their due diligence against this team and put them in their place when they get.
I think in Buffalo they'll remember it because this team has been so bad for so many years. And remember, this is the graveyard of the Maple Leafs. They come here and they lose most of the time. I know, I've been to most of them. So it's going to be tough because the Sabres are red hot. The Leafs are playing very well, and it's going to be a very competitive game. But I'm looking forward to it because these are two teams that are probably going to battle with each other over the next decade. And with the young players that they have, the road could be through Toronto, the road could be through Buffalo, the road could be through Tampa Bay. So we'll see.
Last thing, Mike. When does this William Nylander impasse, the saga, the drama, conclude, and how does it end? Quick.
I think it's going to the 11th hour, meaning I think it's going to go to Friday. And I think in the end, he's going to sign a bridge deal, 2 to 3 years for about $5 million. But
wow.
But if you ask me, I think the best course of action would be a trade.
And what was the point of it all if that's the result?
Well, I mean, I think that's the compromise position. I think Dubas is trying to get him on the long-term deal. They're pushing that agenda, and they're trying to get that done. But I think when it comes down to the day before, if they still haven't a deal, it's a question of the bridge or a trade. And I'd like to think that there's a trade out there that they could make, that they could get equal or close to equal value. But I think in the end, I think they'll compromise on the bridge and then probably trade him later.
Geez, those would be difficult papers to sign for Nylander and his father, if that's indeed the case. And if that's indeed the case, it's a bridge deal for what, and $5 million a year.
Yep.
I don't see this saga and the Cold War between the Nylanders and the Leafs coming to a conclusion. I have a feeling it would only intensify. Mike, gotta go.
Thanks, Norman.
Alrighty, that's a wrap for this edition of the Leafs Convo podcast. Thank you so much for the ear. I didn't think it was going to go as long as it did, but Mike and I, when we get together talking hockey, we're just a couple of chatty Cathys at Norman James TLC. I'd love to know how you listen to our podcast. Is it one of the traditional podcast platforms out there? We're on 20 of them now. Or is it YouTube? Speaking of YouTube, the comment section, amazing. Thank you for so much of the engagement that you guys have produced over the last little while. It's really picked up with this Nylander stuff. And you got to understand, there's a method behind the opinion on Nylander and how much Nylander stuff we produce and how much you guys engage. It's all part of the process. Look back on the Tavares days. Things really hype up. It's part of the business, part of what we try to do, and you guys are coming through in spades. If you have a hate listen for us and you just want to exhaust a bunch of angry things about how I'm terrible and Mike's this and that, do it. Just do it. That's what the YouTube comment section is for. Of course, it's going to be offset by some of the praise and love that we get, and that means so much to us as well. We have a new podcast coming out sometime in the future. I don't know when it is, but in the meantime, please spread what we've just done here. Spread it with love, spread it with hate. As long as you're spreading it, that's what means the most. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. We'll talk to you soon. The Leafs Convo is out.